Welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. I'm going to be talking a little bit about groups and how they operate and OCD forums, and a bit in relation to the post that I put up yesterday. So the post I put up yesterday was talking about with OCD support groups. It's very much like a place where you've got drug dealers and addicts in the same place, because OCD sufferers are addicted to certainty. They want reassurance. That's their sort of drug of choice. And in a support group or a forum, you've got a lot of people asking for reassurance. And then you've got a lot of people that are trying to help each other out. So they give reassurance to support the other person. The problem here is you've got the cycle being continued. And then you've got a bigger problem. And what's the bigger problem? The bigger problem is that you've got a situation where people start support groups. Firstly, this is what happens. I always tell people that I work with, or anyone who's recovering from OCD, wait till you're better before you try and help anybody else. I'm not talking about help in the form of becoming a therapist or coaching people or anything like that. I'm talking about just before they're trying to make so much effort to help other people, or doing a big setting up a support account or anything like that. What happens is the second people feel better, they then rush to go and do that, and they need to be focusing on their own journey because they're usually not better themselves at that point. So that's one of the first parts. Then the other problem that you've got there is what happens is people open these accounts very briefly when they're feeling a sort of a high feeling good, feeling happy. And then they don't follow up on that account. So an account gets opened, a support group gets started. The person doesn't then continue it, because like anything with work or sport or anything you do, it's about persistence and making sure every single day that it's run well. And people don't put in that time. So you get these support groups set up quickly, then have loads of reassurance going on. They're badly moderated because the person running them doesn't know how to moderate them. And then you also have people that because they got better themselves are instantly think they can help everybody. Well, it's not as simple as that. You can't just go from, okay, well, these things work for me, boom, straight out there. It's not something as simple, because OCD operates in a whole range of forms, whole different areas, so many different angles. And what normally happens is people get used to leaving thoughts there and so on, and they think, okay, I'll talk about mindfulness and uncertainty, which obviously is what most of the therapy community is doing anyway, which only gets into a small part of it but doesn't go the whole way. So there's a great amount of knowledge involved in getting people better from OCD, and that's one of the reasons why I don't recruit people to do the coaching for me. I'm pressed for time because I do a huge amount of hours, but it's not as easy for me to recruit someone like that, because what I do has taken over a decade to learn. I worked alongside one of the leading CBT centres in the States and in the UK for a long time. Then I worked as a motivational speaker on OCD for a few years. Then I was working individually with people on OCD, coaching people, getting people better from OCD and all different types of OCD for over a decade. And I've worked with thousands of people. And it's a thing today that you see a lot of people, and this isn't just in the sort of coaching world. You see this also you see this massively in the therapy world. What happens here, which is equally as a problem, is you get people that do, what happens is they might have OCD or anxiety themselves a bit, but not chronic severe OCD that's disabling their life. And they then instantly put themselves down as sort of OCD specialist OCD, where they've barely got much knowledge in OCD. Or what you're seeing is somebody who's a therapist picking a niche. So they decide to read a little bit more on OCD and then call themselves a specialist in that, where they've then got very little knowledge. I mean, one of my sayings that I posted on here as a quote was, I said that when it comes to OCD, the average therapist has probably got as much knowledge on OCD as what you could write down on the front of a playing card. The average OCD specialist on OCD has got what you could probably write down on the back and front of about 10 playing cards, right? Now, obviously, there's a huge range in variety of specialists. Some of them will get years of experience working with OCD, but that does not mean by any means that they're going to get you better. They've got to really understand it to do that. Because I certainly went to a lot of specialists myself along the way, and there's a load of sort of it's the problem is with OCD. There's a lot that goes into it, and it's very easy for anyone who doesn't understand it to think they understand it. It's very easy to think, okay, leaving thoughts there will do that, changing our relationship with thoughts, and there's a lot more involved in that. And it's very easy to think that will cut it, but it will cut it in certain situations, but it won't cut it in the majority. People will get stuck. If someone's coming in with POCD and they are absolutely, utterly convinced that they really are that, you won't be able to get under it with uncertainty alone. The person is utterly convinced. They are believing every sensation in the brain. So it's not as simple as that. And so that's what I'm just saying, you've got to tread with caution there. Now, when it comes in relation to the support groups, there are when I was trying to get better from OCD, there was tons of forums, lots of anxiety forums that were very big. So this was when I was first looking, how old was I? 21, 22. And they were very big forums. A lot of them were sort of No More Panic was one of them. It was a very big anxiety forum that obviously covered generalized anxiety, depression, anxiety, panic disorder, all different things. And some of those had good posting, very good posts. I mean, I learned a lot of great things from forums. There were some very good forums in terms of sections of forums that were very good. But then there was terrible forums. Lots of the OCD specific forums were terrible. Lots of the categories for OCD alone in the forum were a disaster. And you just see, I know that if I went in today, which is 15 years, when I was 17 when I started, it was 18, 19, some of the forums then probably 20. Yeah, so you're talking 16 years ago. I bet you would find the exact same people that were in some of those forums speaking today, offering the same reassurance as 15 years ago, telling the same story, how they're still stuck, how you've just got to learn to accept it. Now, that was another post that I put out this week, which is absolutely, what the post is highlighting, the myth, is absolute nonsense, but it's spread all round the OCD community, and for various reasons, and I'm going to go into those now. The post I put out was saying that recovery, people have to learn to accept just being anxious all the time, physical symptoms, and learning to live like that. That's absolute crap. Recovery is not being able to tell the difference between having OCD or not. Yes, I'll get the odd intrusive thought that will come in now and again, but you're talking about how minor it is in my life. I couldn't tell the difference between if I didn't have it or if I did. Now, the reason a lot of people still don't believe that you can get recovered is as simple as this, and it's not simple, but you need to understand this to see how it comes about. It's this. OCD recovery requires a big shift in perspective that most people don't have because they haven't learned how to do that. Because most therapists don't do it to that extent. Most specialists in OCD don't understand it to that extent or deliver it like that. So the majority of people do not feel that shift. Without that shift, they can't see that. It takes a time. Now, there are people that you'd see like in a forum or something that who'd read a lot of books and studied on themselves and really learned to accept some things that when I first started out, you used to see that they'd made that perspective shift and it had taken them many years and they'd been stuck to that till that point. And I'm linking it into forums as that's the topic of conversation today. Those people would say something like, I was terrified of death for 20 years. But then I had a stroke. And then I realised, do you know what? I really, with that, which acted like kind of exposure to them. plus all the understanding over time of different things in relation to that fear. They were like, do you know what, fuck it. If I die, I die. I nearly died the other day. I could see I died. I accept that I could die. I really accept it and the symptoms. And all the symptoms faded away. And they got to recovery in that aspect of their fear. And it's because they utterly accepted that, they saw it. But it takes, you don't need a stroke to do that, but you need a lot of exposures and a lot of things to get into it that most people don't do. Now, until you've seen that and you're on the other side of that, it's very easy to think, oh, I've got physical symptoms for the rest of my life. Oh, I'm stuck like this forever. I'm never going to get better. And then that is reinforced by other people in forums saying things like, oh yeah, that was me too. I had that happen. I've been stuck for 25 years. I've got the physical symptoms still persisting and that same thought and it's not budged. But that's just because they're not better yet. Or they're going to get better because they're making those decisions to make that change. It's the same as, think of forums like this. There's the famous phrase, which is, you're the sum of the 5 people you hang around the most. Well, forums are like that. Far too often, you see people that, if you had a failing business, you wouldn't go and find someone who's bankrupt to give you advice on getting your business better. You'd look for somebody who had a good experience of business, who was going to give you good pointers, who'd overcome a similar situation to yourself, for example. And that's the same as forums. You want to be circulating when you're in support communities, which are obviously a game-changing environment because it's a team effort in well-run ones, because you're learning from them, you're learning all things about your own stuff, you're seeing it from the other side. They are incredibly beneficial. However, you must, when you're going on in this journey, you must think about all the things that you're hearing from people, where they're coming from on their journey, who you're hanging around. Because if you're hanging around people that haven't got better for 20 years and are reinforcing the same, they're not going to be beneficial to you. You want to be hanging around people who are looking to change, looking to get better, looking to recover. That's what you want to be around. So you've got to pick who you socialize with in anything in life, and especially in OCD recovery. I often see it where I run a lot of groups on WhatsApp and on the Facebook group, but predominantly on WhatsApp because that's what I initially started with before we did the Facebook group. And with the WhatsApp groups, I often see someone come in and I think, God, they've got a lot of problems with reassurance. And then who do they make friends with? The other person who's got a problem with a lot of reassurance. The worst friendship possible. So I deliberately go in there to discourage reassurance, discourage those two interacting on that level. You've got to pick who is going to empower you. It's about empowerment. It's about looking for change, looking for what's going to make a significant difference to your journey. The biggest hindrances to most people in the OCD world are this. I'll tell you what they are. One is most people don't put in the effort to get better. 2 is people have learned to accept that this is me, my lot for life. I'm stuck like this and it's not going to get any better, right? 3 is it's like with cars. When someone's got a car and they have to have it repaired, they think, God, that's so much money to spend on repairing my car. Now, I'm not taking away for a second that OCD treatment isn't cheap. I'm highlighting that when it comes to repairing our cars, we think, oh, we wouldn't want to pay that, but we'd pay other money on vacations, clothes, nights out, drinks, whatever. You have to put your priority and you have to say, right, I'm going to, and I'm not talking about spending it with me, I'm talking about spending it with anybody who's going to get you better in the world. You've got to set up a structure and say, okay, I'm going to be seeing my therapist once a week or once every 2 weeks or whatever, and have that structure. Because without that, it doesn't happen. You won't get better. Trying to recover on your own is something that is very difficult because you need someone from the other side to see what you're doing, what you're thinking, so you can go back and forth and work out how they can see, I'm doing that. It's like the operating system. People come to me and say, I've got this fear, how do I fix that? Well, it's not that, it's how they're operating with that. So we have to look at that from different angles. So I often say to people, it's all right reading every book on OCD, but until you actually speak to somebody who really understands OCD and is working with you with a program, it's very difficult to stay in that cycle. When I started therapy and I was at a CBT center, there was a very good CBT center at the time, and I was there, I used to think, okay, well, I'll do my session, I'll try and learn all the rest myself. And what I was realising each session is my approach to everything was trying to get absolute certainty, get everything fixed in the session, move on like that. And that was actually what was hindering me. So you've got to approach it like, I'm going to set out a plan. This is what I'm going to do in terms of therapy or reading or whatever you're going to do. And then you've got to follow through with that plan. Then you've got to keep on top of that during your lifespan with OCD. If you just get better and run, which is what most people do, they get better, they feel better, and then they think, I don't want anything more to do with OCD. Hence why you see so little recovery stories, and I have to put so much effort into people to say, look, sharing your story would be very beneficial to people. You don't have to do it. You know, the people who come to me, a very small fraction share their recovery stories because one, they might be in a job they don't want everyone to know they're OCD, or two, they don't want anything to do with OCD after they're feeling better because they think, oh, if I go back near it, then I'll get worse, I'll get stuck, I'll get triggered. But if that was true, I wouldn't be able to do my job because I'm hearing every thought, every second of the day, 7 days a week, all the time. So it's being around it is what brings it down. So that's what we need to be doing. And I'll be covering a lot about all of these specific points in my new podcast, which is going to be launching soon, and YouTube channel, which I hope to make a game changer for the anxiety community. It will be targeting specifically OCD, but it will be covering generalized anxiety disorder and panic disorder specifically as well, and touching upon addiction too, because they obviously overlap a lot. So there will be a coverage of those areas of the things that I think need changing, but specifically focusing on OCD. Right, now, let me go back to the beginning questions and go through those before they build up. Can you make a live on ROCD? Yep, I will be doing that. I've done quite a few on ROCD, but I will be doing some more. Reassurance confessions have made my OCD worse. I feel great, then worry that people judge me. Confession is never the answer. Short-term relief, like reassurance. Can you touch on GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, and severe self-doubt? I will do. I will be covering generalized anxiety disorder in its own Instagram live. Can OCD make you doubt basically everything? Anything. Anxiety is under control, but depersonalization doesn't go away. Why? Because you're probably still scared of it, or it's an anxiety symptom from another fear. I get used to feel depersonalized, but it's still uncomfortable sometimes. Why doesn't it go away? Because you want rid of it. That's the problem. I imagine, but we need to go into this in a lot more detail. Firing these questions back, this isn't a substitute for the coaching sessions. This is just to give a brief idea of things. Let's have a look. Shift in perspective is a hard part. It takes practice to see that. How important is diet to recovery? Diet's helpful, but I mean, we can often go for sugary, high sort of feel good in the moment foods, but that's not going to bring, that's something that we want to wean off. But in terms of people that talk about, oh, I've got completely recovered by a change in my diet, it's complete nonsense. Diet has got a helpful benefit, but if it was about diet, I wouldn't be running an OCD coaching program. I'd be running a gym. Okay, and I did used to own a health club, and when I did, I can assure you, I had people in there with anxiety, depression, suicidal all the time, and I had all the best chefs that were cooking food for people. I had all the best trainers doing one-to-one with them, and physiotherapy and massage and everything. And if people came in with anxiety, it's the same for me because I was going through all that myself. It didn't work for fixing OCD or anxiety. It would help take the edge off, but it won't get fully under it. If it did, like I said, I'd be running gyms, not running OCD recovery programs. What similarities are there between social anxiety and OCD? They're all link. They're all based on your irrational beliefs related to the situations. What about if you literally can barely afford to pay food and bills and the NHS failed you? I can't work due to OCD and physical illness too. Well, in that instance, you've got to, first of all, you've got to think, in this life, the only person that's going to get us better is us. Relying on NHS is a very, very long road. Long waiting queues. It's going to take a very, very long time. But it's sometimes the only option we have. But it's usually not. We can usually do a lot more. What can we do that doesn't cost a lot? Well, one, we can watch things on YouTube and Instagram like this. It's all free. Then you can be doing reading. You can buy books. You can get a lot of the books that are on my reading list from secondhand shops or secondhand on Amazon for £3. You can read those. You can watch the videos on YouTube corresponding to those. You can practice that. You can do all the homeworks that get set out a lot on this Instagram page. And then what you can do is you can find groups to attend. So our group calls are once or twice a week. Now, obviously, they are a bit out of budget for a lot of people, but that doesn't mean that you can't attend them once if you didn't have the resources. I imagine you could still attend once every month or something like that, or a little bit longer period than that. And just attending now and again and highlighting to me and saying, look, I can't afford to come regularly, but I really want to learn in this session. Of course, we can set you out the things to help you to get started, the things that you need. It's not going to be as specific as a one-to-one, but it's a hell of a lot better than not doing anything. And then you want to work with your NHS therapist, which is obviously paid for, that you can do covering different things that's needed in that. So you have a mixture, but you can find ways. People come to me from India, Philippines, Thailand, Pakistan, that they come in much rarer, but they try in those sessions to get everything covered that they need covered. So you just have to balance out how often you come in, and I think that's the best way to do it. When I was having therapy in New York at the time, it was expensive. I didn't go in that often initially because I thought it was a lot of money. Now I could have afforded it because my family were helping me. But I just thought, I can do it on my own. It's a lot to spend. I can do it on my own. Looking back, I'd have probably liked to have gone in a bit more. But at the time, I did have a budget restraint in my own mind. So that was a bit of a problem. I mean, with OCD, it's a tricky one. Because what you have to do is you have to balance it out. You want how you attend, but you've also got to view it like this. People often say, "Oh, OCD treatment is very expensive," but you've got to ask yourself what you're getting. Yes, it's very expensive if you're paying somebody who's got no knowledge on OCD, very little experience, and doesn't get you better. That is really overpriced. But then when you look at it, what the person's doing to help people with OCD, you've got to know a lot, and you've got to have practiced that for a very, very long time. And it's like anything. Anything in life that's effective, whether it's to go to a specialist in hands, or go to a best fitness trainer in the world, or one of the best in the world, or a really, really good physiotherapist. The reason that they're obviously going to cost what they do is because what they're providing is a service that's very effective. So it is a kind of thing like that. In relation to my own pricing, the way that I've done it is I've only got, well, not hands, because I'm using my mouth as I'm talking, but there's only me. I don't have anyone else, so my time is constrained to that. And obviously the demand for people wanting coaching with me is high, and it's not as much as the hours that I can fill myself. So because of that, the pricing is what it is, because it's what I based was a rate that I thought was reasonable in relation to the market for OCD, so that it didn't, what I never used to like was where you used to go to therapists. I used to go to Harley Street in London, all right, these were medical, very highly educated therapists in Harley Street that didn't do anything for me, didn't get me better. So I wasn't interested in how much I was paying was irrelevant to what I was getting, because some of those would cost me £350 an hour, and I wasn't getting better. And I used to think that's absolutely ridiculous amount to charge. I think that was absolute robbery. Same as when I used to have problems with my stomach, and I used to have to go in and see stomach specialists or ENTs. I remember paying £400 a half hour to see a top ENT when I had tinnitus, which was actually partly related to my anxiety. So in terms of pricing, you've got to do your research. You want to look for things that seem reasonable. You want to look for what seems like a fair price. Whoever you work with, whatever specialist you work with, you want to think, does this make sense? If the guy has written tons and tons of books and is and is clearly changing people, and he's highly regarded, well, of course the price is very much justified. But if it's some anxiety coach with about 10 posts on Instagram that's only got themselves better, you want to stay away from that by a mile. And that's the same goes for any therapist that's charging a lot of money just because they've got qualified as a therapist and they're treating OCD, and they say, I'm treating OCD. You've got to ask them, well, how much do you know about OCD? Now, you've got to be forward with people, okay? Because people are forward with me. That's what they do, and I encourage that. You've got to say to people, listen, right, what are you going to do for me to get me better from OCD? Who have you worked with? Have you got people better from OCD? What's your knowledge like of OCD? Too many centres, too many social media accounts, everything. I really want to highlight this. If there's an account, a book or anything that's barely got any information about it on the front or on the page or on their business account, barely any information at all about their OCD. That doesn't mean, right, they can have a website for their centre, but then, and that doesn't have to have that much information, but then they've got to have other corresponding information that relates to it all, that's in a great amount of detail. If they haven't, that's because they usually don't know much about OCD. So you want to be very careful about that. Ebooks I bought a lot of in the past, sites that were very limited information claiming it was all in ebook, and the ebook was all padded out and had all the same stuff I'd heard before, same as most books on OCD. Most books on OCD are about 10 main points repeated in about 100 different books. All the authors saying, oh, my friend's bringing out a great book, this is an amazing book, it's going to change the way. Selling the other person's book and back and forth, selling each other's books, and then you've got the same points being reiterated and the same thing. I could pick up 100 self-help books from the library and pretty much all of them would have the same points in them corresponding across all of them. So you've got to be very careful about that. For years, the reason I felt lost, stuck and alone is because I'd read so many books that all had the exact same thing. I thought, well, it's me. I've got it wrong. I'm not going to get better. How am I going to get better? But what I hadn't realised is that when I stumbled across Albert Ellis, the likes of Claire Weeks, I started to see, well, wait a minute. What they're saying is very thin. It's not under the surface here. That, if that goes, okay, wait, so what Albert Ellis is saying is unconditional self-acceptance. The human can accept themselves and have value for being alive and human. Then the behaviour you can dislike because the behaviour is unhealthy, but the behaviour is not the entirety of the human. Right, okay, so if I learn to employ that and put that into practice with persistence and work, then I can get to a position where I can adopt that. And will I have chronic anxiety? No. Chronic guilt? No. Okay, is that the recovery goal? Yes. That's what I have to lay out for people so they can see, look, you spent years, but you're still stuck. This is why. People come in the door to me on average of seeing about 7 to 8 therapists. I had been to that number before I started to get better. That's why we feel more lost and more stuck than ever, because we've been to so many doors that have closed. This account is all about looking at the myths, looking at the things that don't work, looking at the things that do work, and bringing attention to that. Far too often when I post on Instagram, I get 70 comments saying, that doesn't work, that's not true. That's why I wanted to make this video, to highlight all those points of why those things don't seem true. If you are stuck, you will think that recovery isn't possible because you haven't felt it. Until you've felt it, you don't know. The majority of people that go to therapy for OCD get to a position where they go along and they move through life. It's kind of a coasting, but they never get true recovery. Why? Because it takes a lot of practice. So what I am drawing attention to, do not give up on recovery. It is achievable. It takes practice and perseverance, but it is so bloody worth it. Right, now let's get back to these questions. Can you do a live on HOCD? Absolutely. Do obsessions ever go away? Yes, they do once you start getting better. Any recommendations on OCD books as exposure? Yes, pin to the top of this page. Start with How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything by the founder of CBT, Albert Ellis. Sensory Motor Live, I will do that and will be covered in the podcast. How do you unconditionally accept harm coming to others? I will cover that in the live. Is it normal to feel guilty for having masturbated? Same-sex thoughts, does it mean something even if someone never felt want to feel any attraction towards the same gender? I will cover that in all the harm OCD, HOCD, sexual harm OCD related lives specifically. Guys, great to have you all here. I will be obviously moving, I'll be doing still quite a few lives, but I'll be moving a lot more to the podcast where I will be covering all of this stuff in detail. Any questions you want to ask me, send them across. If you want to attend any of our groups, please join the Facebook group. It's a free group. It's just attached to the Facebook page. Please join that. You know, it's a group all about no reassurance. I moderate it every single day. So it's a good group to have a look at. And if you want to attend our not one-to-one sessions, our group sessions or one-to-one sessions, you just have to email me. There's lots of different things that I ran, the group, Facebook group, WhatsApp group, one-to-one coaching via Skype, as well as the group coaching via Skype. That last question there, when is that next live video? I try and do them every 2 to 3 days, so that will probably be when the next one is. And with moral scrupulosity, I literally have to repeat reassurance. Scrupulosity, religious related OCD, I will cover those in the next live. All right, guys, see you later. Take it easy.